She is an assistant professor in the Textile Engineering, Chemistry, and Science Department at NC State. She also serves as the principal investigator of the Sustainable Dye Chemistry Laboratory. It focuses on designing, developing, and applying dyes through both traditional and innovative methods that prioritize sustainable chemistry practices. From NC State, she earned her Ph.D. in Fiber and Polymer Science with a minor in chemistry. She also has her B.S. in Polymer and Color Chemistry. Let's hear it for Dr. Tova Williams.
Awesome. So I'm going to try and juggle these three things. We'll see how it goes. But hello, everyone. All right, so look around. Color is literally everywhere, from this wall over here to our clothes, our hair, our makeup, if we're wearing makeup. You get the point. Color is everywhere. But imagine a world with hardly no color. We talked about this earlier, right? It'd be quite depressing. Recently, I just came back from my honeymoon in Hawaii. Yeah, thank you. It was awesome. I wish I was still there, I'm not gonna lie. But as we just heard, you know, color, it plays a role in how we feel, right? So immediately after I stepped off the plane, I saw these wonderful colors, and my mind went straight into vacation mode. But color serves many other functions. It can tell us when to go, when to slow down, or speed up for some of us, or when to stop, like a traffic light, right? This chameleon, it can help protect, and so the chameleon will change its color to adapt to its environment. It can help us identify things like fruits and vegetables. It can also help power devices like solar cells. These are just a few of the many things that color can do for us. Okay? We can get color a variety of ways, mainly from various pigments and dyes that we can extract from nature or we can make in the lab, so we synthesize them in that case. But then there's this thing called structural color that we scientists call it, and that comes from, for example, a butterfly's wings. And so a butterfly, it has very tiny structures in its wings that will reflect light in different ways and give rise to certain colors. And so that's pretty cool because in this case, you know, due to structural color, you wouldn't need a dye or a pigment to get the color. And so scientists are trying to study this in more detail so that we can color materials in a more sustainable way without relying on the production of pigments and dyes. Okay? So as mentioned, I am a professor at NC State. I'm a new professor. My lab was established almost 3 years ago. So back in 2022, the Sustainable Dye Chemistry Lab. A few of my students are actually here today. Yes, so sweet, right? So as mentioned, we focus on applying, developing, designing dyes primarily. We do this for various materials, whether it's hair or textile. And so dyes, they are small chemicals. Side note, I'm going to have some chemical structures up for those of you who don't like chemistry. Bear with me just a little bit. So yeah, dyes are small colored chemicals, and they will absorb in the visible range of the electromagnetic spectrum. So that's roughly 400 to 700 nanometers. Dyes are going to be what we call soluble in whatever we apply them in. So it's typically water. What does that mean? They're going to dissolve well. So think about Kool-Aid. Yeah. I actually think I had this flavor, mixed it up not too long ago for my husband and myself, something similar. Anyways, after you mix it, you know, the Kool-Aid has the dye and the sugar, and at the end you should get a solution so you don't really see any dye particles left. Pigments, they can also absorb in the visible range, so roughly 400 to 700 nanometers. We can find these in paints, like on that wall. They're not going to be soluble in whatever we apply them in. So if we think about this paint, the pigment's going to be suspended. But when we go to paint a wall, we get this nice coverage. We don't really see particles, which is nice. Okay? So let's talk synthetic versus natural, the big debate, right? And so we see this with dyes, but we also see this with other chemicals. Dyes that we make in the lab, they can be great because they can give us things like resistance to fading if we expose them to light, or if we wash them several times, if we apply them to our textiles and whatnot. On the flip side, natural dyes, while they're not coming from petroleum, they can fade over time very easily. So it's hard to have the best of both worlds sometimes. But that's where my research comes in. And so what if we could grow or make our dyes using bacteria or other biological hosts to make dyes that nature already makes, or convince nature to make something it doesn't already make? Okay? We're actually doing that in collaboration with the Gavin Williams Laboratory at NC State. Or, sorry, it's a little hard to see these structures, but imagine there's some chemical structures up here. I blurred them out a little bit, but I guess I blurred them out a little bit too much. What if we started with a natural dye source and we used enzymes to do things like remove groups we don't want on the dye? So let's say we want something that's hydrophobic or non-water loving, and we remove things that are hydrophilic or water loving, so we ultimately get something that's hydrophobic and not water loving. Okay, what if we do that with enzymes? Or what if we do that with organic chemistry? And so my lab is actually currently focused on this now, and so stay tuned for our results on this. I'm going to coin these hybrid dyes where we get the best of both worlds. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up now because it's been 5 minutes. So as we're trying to move toward a more sustainable future and think about, how we can get our colors, let's think not only let's think about what color can give us beyond the beauty aspect, right? And can give us many other functions. But let's also use, if we're people who are making dyes in the lab or creating color, let's use that as an opportunity to challenge ourselves to make a more sustainable future. And so thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Let me stay up here.
A few questions for you. All right, questions for Dr. Williams. We'll go back here.
Hi, Dr. Williams. So I'm also at the Wilson College of Textiles, so I wanted to say thank you for emailing us and letting us know about this event.
Thank you for coming.
Yes. And so my question is, so you brought up natural versus synthetic dyes. And one of the reasons people want to use natural dyes is because of the toxicity of synthetic dyes. But the longevity of those synthetic dyes are much better. And so what are you seeing encouraging developments in that space to either lengthen the life of natural dyes, whether that's like a hybrid, or like making synthetic dyes that aren't as bad for us and the natural environment?
Yes.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your question. So I'm going to answer it, but I'm going to say a few things that may not be what you asked, but will help with answering it, if that makes sense. I am, again, so glad you asked that. So the common thinking is synthetic is bad, natural is safe, right? But there are cases where you have synthetic dyes that are less of a hazard than natural dyes. So there are some natural dyes that are mutagenic, that could be carcinogenic, right? But we think, oh, just because it came from nature, it's not going to pose a hazard, right? Natural means safe, okay? On the side of synthetic dyes, we still have to, think about how we're producing them. But there are several examples of synthetic dyes that are not mutagenic. And they wouldn't be carcinogenic, and they're not aquatic toxins, et cetera. And so just thinking from that mindset, I try to be careful to say one is better than the other. It just really depends. You mentioned longevity, right? And so with several of the natural dyes, we don't get that. But there is a group of natural dyes that are very similar to synthetic dyes. I actually have one on my slides. I don't know if I could go back. Let me see if I can go back. Right here. Okay, not this slide. Okay, sorry, I thought I had this up here. Let's go back. So this bottom dye is a natural dye, right? But there are dyes that have a very similar structure that are synthetic, okay? These dyes are actually dyes that are more likely to be resistant to fading to UV light. So working with these natural dyes is advantageous. You mentioned, I guess, hybrid dyes. That's the space I'm trying to get my lab to be in, where we are working with natural dyes and we're doing modifications so we can get towards something that's more resistant to fading, more, gives us more longevity. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay.
Okay, we'll do one more quick question right here.
Yeah.
Hi. What are resources available to the public to help us, if you're environmentally conscious, to avoid those mutagenic and carcinogenic color spaces, maybe in clothing, food, whatever your concern may be?
Yeah, I'll say this. So like our foods and things, they should have on the label like the dyes that are present, even with hair dyes, same thing. And I'll answer just from the perspective of if you know you're likely to be allergic to something, because allergy is another concern. It's like Ph.D. and C-Red 40. People want to stay away from that. And so I would just be mindful of like just reading labels and just checking, you know, does this thing that's red, whether it's a food or dye, whatever, I mean a hair dye, does this have something I know I can't consume? I'm trying to think of like if there's a website. I'm sure there are several websites out there that you could do research on to help you with that. I don't want to direct you too wrong, but I just want to give that example. I would just be mindful of your products because it should be disclosed the colorants that are within those products. Does that answer your question? I hope, somewhat.
Thank
Okay.
you, Dr. Williams. Thank you. Just leave it on. Did you hit it? Maybe I should like make it green. Oh, you're good.